Anderson Cooper, AC 360, CNN weeknights 10 Eastern.
Tonight, a made-up story about the President of the United States and the politicians and pundits who are spreading it. Now, let me start by saying it's not our job to defend the President of the United States. We don't take political sides in this program. We're not liberal. We're not conservative. We try to hold all politicians accountable on facts, on truth. And there's a lot of reasons to oppose this president. And there's a lot of ways our government wastes money. No one needs to make up any stuff or spread false stories about waste. But that is exactly what is happening right now. Perhaps you've heard the story that President Obama's trip to Asia starting tomorrow is going to cost taxpayers, you, $200 million a day, about $2 billion for the entire trip. Perhaps you've heard or read online that 34 Navy ships are going to be diverted for the trip. It sounds outrageous, a multi-billion-dollar boondoggle, a slap in the face to recession-weary Americans, a clear example of an imperial presidency and wasteful government, as Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann said last night on this very program. She was on to talk about budget cuts and balancing the budget, and my first question was about Medicare, but she clearly didn't want to talk about that and went right to the president's alleged $200 million a day trip. Republican Paul Ryan has suggested sharp cuts in Medicare and Social Security. Are you willing to make cuts there?
Well, I think we know that just within a day or so, the President of the United States will be taking a trip over to India that is expected to cost the taxpayers $200 million a day. He's taking 2,000 people with him. He'll be renting out over 870 rooms in India, and these are five-star hotel rooms at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. This is the kind of over-the-top spending. It's a very small example.
Well, I challenged her on the numbers. I told her the White House says they're wildly inflated. She didn't back down, though, saying, quote, these are the numbers that are coming out in the press. No, it sort of sounds legitimate, right? The press, newspapers, networks, they check facts, they have multiple sources. But it turns out the only press in which this story was coming out was an Indian press report. And that $200 million a day figure, where'd that come from? Well, that was in a quote by an alleged Indian provincial official reported by India's press trust, their equivalent of our AP or Reuters. I say alleged provincial official because we have no idea who this person is. No name was given. It was an anonymous quote, the kind that Sarah Palin has recently been railing against. Some reporter in India wrote this article with this figure in it. No proof was given, no follow-up reporting done. Now, you'd think if a member of Congress was going to use this figure as a fact, she would want to be pretty darn sure it was accurate, right? But there hasn't been any follow-up reporting on this Indian story. The Indian article was picked up by the Drudge Report and other sites online, and it quickly made its way into conservative talk radio.
In 2 days, and I'll be in India at $200 million a day.
Have you ever seen the president? Ever seen the president go over for a vacation where you needed 34 warships? $2 billion. $2 billion. 34 warships. We are sending... He's traveling with 3,000 people.
But the idea that you're going to take 3,000 people and you're booking over 500 rooms in a hotel and you're taking 40 airplanes.
$200 million
a day.
$200 million?
A day.
No president has ever anywhere close to 40 airplanes, 3,000 people, 500 rooms in one hotel. And that's just one hotel for a 10-day trip, $200 million a day. It's never been done before.
$200 million. $200 million each day on security and other aspects of this incredible royalist visit. 3,000 people, including Secret Service agents.
You take this many people, this many airplanes, the question is, are you coming back?
Again, no one really seemed to care to check the facts. For security reasons, the White House doesn't comment on logistics of presidential trips, but they have made an exception this time to say the $200 million a day figure is wildly inflated. This morning, Robert Gibbs was asked about it at the White House.
We have set the record straight with you guys. I'm not going to go into how much it costs to protect the president. Costs are comparable to when President Clinton and when President Bush traveled abroad. This trip doesn't cost $200 million a day.
Even the Pentagon weighed in, knocking down the idea that so many Navy ships were being redeployed.
I will take the liberty this time of dismissing as absolutely absurd this notion that somehow we were deploying 10% of the Navy, some 34 ships and an aircraft carrier in support of the president's trip to Asia. That's just comical. Nothing close to that is being done.
Let's remember, the war in Afghanistan costs, according to the Congressional Budget Office, about $190 million a day. So the idea that a president's trip might cost more than the war in Afghanistan, That just doesn't make any sense. I want to bring you over the data wall now, because even though we don't know the final number for how much this trip is going to cost, we do have some hard facts to go on. And by the way, these facts could have easily been checked by anyone who is spreading this story. Take a look. President Clinton made a trip to Africa in 1998 that gives some sense of what presidential trips cost. And Clinton's trip was to 6 countries in Africa. He crisscrossed the continent over 11 days. It involved 1,300 people. And according to the GAO, the cost of it, adjusted for inflation, was about $5.2 million every day. So that's what that trip cost, $5.2 million every day. Now, let's look at comparison. President Obama's trip will be going to 4 countries in 9 days, fewer countries than President Clinton. We don't know the number of travelers. We don't know the final price tag. But there's no reason to believe it's even close to $200 million a day. The guy from the Pentagon you saw earlier, he said this is comical. Well, it would be comical if it wasn't being used by a powerful congresswoman and powerful pundits. There are plenty of reasons to oppose the president, plenty of things to point to as government waste and overspending. You don't have to make stuff up.